Hello everybody, we are continuing to work our way towards Malignant. Today we are looking at The Ring 2. Now, this movie seems like a good candidate for a video idea that I want to make, but I need to do more, for lack of a better word, research, which is movies that are not written as the movies they are. And what I mean by that, a good example I think is Joker. A lot of people have said that the Joker movie seems like it wasn't written as a Joker movie. It was written as an original idea, and some studios were like, well, hey, if we change some names and add in a little bit of this and that, we can make this a Batman movie. So it works as a Batman movie or as a Joker movie, but it seems like that's not where it started from. And this film doesn't seem like it's a Ring movie. Which is weird because based on what I've read in the IMDb trivia, it was clearly always intended to be that. So I think sometimes that happens where someone writes a script and then it is changed to fit an IP. And this seems to be a case where someone meant something to be part of an IP, but it just doesn't feel like it. So the first movie, it's very much about the tape and the curse of the tape and what happens when you watch the tape and how can you get around what happens to you when you watch the tape. And that's the whole thing. And this movie, not one character watches the tape. The tape is played at the beginning of the movie, but the character who's supposed to be watching it doesn't watch it. It then sits dormant for a while. Rachel finds it, destroys it, and that's it. That's the end of the tape. This movie is not about the tape or the curse of the tape. This movie is about Samara, who is the ghost from the first movie, but this is just a ghost story. And The Ring was more than a ghost story. It was something different. It was something unique. And this kind of drops the ball on that. So I'm not as big of a fan of this one. I don't think it's horrible. And I read that there was a lot of studio interference, so I feel like it could have been a lot better. But it's just not the same. And I was trying to figure out why throughout the movie. Why does this feel so different? It's because it's not the same kind of movie. It's got some of the same characters. It is technically continuing their story, but it's not the story of The Ring. But I have some notes, so let's go through it. So we have some characters from the short film, Rings, which I've done a video on already. Mainly the kid from The Luck of the Irish and Emily Van Camp, who plays Sharon Carter. And I asked the question in my video for that short film, where are his parents at? What's going on with them? It's mentioned in this that his parents are away. So whatever that means. I guess they were away for more than a week, but I guess that happens. In the short film, we see him going through... The short film is a lot more similar to The Ring. We see him experiencing what it's like in the aftermath of having watched the video. And he seems like he's really, really on edge, barely able to hold it together. In the beginning of this movie, he seems fine. And, like, he goes to the kitchen after a while, and, so we see that he's not actually fine, he's just putting on an act. But that character must be a pretty good actor, because he doesn't seem at all troubled when he's trying to get Emily to watch the tape. Then I just wrote, did they add footage to the tape? Because there were shots when the tape is playing, the one time it's played in this movie. There are shots in it that I don't remember from the first movie. And so I don't know if they were added or maybe we just didn't see the whole thing in the first movie. I know they've got the tape as a bonus feature on the DVD, but I didn't watch it. So maybe it was in that video, and maybe it was, or maybe it wasn't shown in the first movie. But it seemed to me like they might have added stuff. I don't know why they would have done that, but I don't know that for sure. So I don't want to give it too much flack for that. Then we see from Samara's point of view. So I think it's that same character, the boy, is looking at the TV and he sees Samara coming up out of the well, and then the camera shifts and we see from her view inside the TV as she crawls out. I just thought that was neat. Not really much to say about it. I just thought it was neat. So like at the beginning of this movie, I kind of dug because it continued, you know, what the first movie was about, but it got over that pretty quickly. So then we return to Rachel and Aiden, and I was surprised that not only did they get the same kid, because I know a lot of times in movies with kid actors, you replace the kid actors, especially back in the early 2000s. I think it's a little bit better now, but especially back then. But he looks the same. It's 3 years later. He looks the same. I think he was 9 in the first one and 12 in the second one. They got lucky with him, because the girl that played Samara, I read that she aged out of it, so they had to get a new girl to play her, but I couldn't tell. But they got lucky with him, because he looks exactly the same. So I did write down a question, which they kind of they answer later on. I wrote, because they moved to a new city, and like as soon as they get there, things start happening again. So I wrote, what are the chances it happens in this town right after they move there? And they kind of explain it because they say that Samara is following Aiden. She wants to, you know, basically possess Aiden and be with Rachel. But the short film tells us that this experience that happened in the beginning of the movie with Jake and Emily was not random or chance. There's a whole cult in this town built up around this, which seems like it's been going for a while, and that seems totally separate to Samara following these guys to town. So this is one of those things where it's like, if you're gonna do a short film to fill in some gaps, don't have it contradict your movie. Just why bother at that point? So even though I had problems with the short film, that continued the story from the first one, and the beginning of this movie continues the story from the first one. But then after that, it's just totally different, and it's solely focused on Samara as a ghost trying to possess Aiden. But it doesn't make sense with what we've seen so far. Did she influence this entire cult ahead of time so that she would be there? Does that mean that she's not doing anything anywhere? It doesn't make any sense. At one point, after Rachel realizes that it's not, this whole thing isn't over yet and it's still happening, she says out loud to herself, "We only made one copy." That's not true. You made 2 copies. You made a copy, and then he made a copy. Now, maybe what she means is only one additional version of the tape survived after their encounter because she did destroy the original. Or I guess it could be a comment on the fact that they made a copy of the copy rather than copying the original. But she doesn't say either of those things. And it doesn't come back ever at all in the movie. It's not ever explained why that's a big deal. She just says, "We only made one copy," which is factually incorrect. And then that goes nowhere. So I'm like, why do you put in things that are wrong if you're not at least going to do something with it? Just take that line out. It's pointless. So then, you know, I talked about how would they do something like this in the modern age. We get, I think his name is Max, the guy that owns the newspaper. He literally says the line, "I heard they don't even make the machines anymore," in reference to VHS tapes, as Rachel is looking over VHS tapes at this fair thing. And, like, that seems like a logical place to take the story, but it's not ever brought up again. It doesn't come into play again. It's weird. It's weird that it's there. Why do you put in these weird lines that point things out and then don't go anywhere? I don't understand it. So, like I said, according to the director, the studio had a lot of notes on this and made a lot of changes. So maybe these things did go somewhere originally, and maybe some of that gets picked up in the 2017 film. I don't know. I haven't watched it yet. But it really makes this movie suffer, the way that it all plays out. then we have Samara encountering, I guess, not really attacking, but we have the Samara encounter with Aiden in the bathroom at the fair. And I do like the way that they have her move without taking steps. It's not consistent with the first movie and with most of this movie, because most of the time we see her walking or whatever. But in this scene, she just kind of glides toward him, and I like it. I think it's creepy. I think it's unsettling. I think it's a good effect. It doesn't make sense. It's not consistent, but I like it. I'm trying to say some nice things about this movie. So, before I started this movie, I couldn't remember if I had seen it before or not. And as I was watching it, I couldn't remember if I had seen it before or not. I knew that I had seen something in the Ring franchise that had that kid that played in The Luck of the Irish in it. But I didn't remember if it was this or the short film or both. And nothing was really jogging my memory in this movie, so I wasn't sure. But then we got to the one thing that I do remember from this movie. I remembered once I saw it again, which is the deer. The CGI deer in this movie look so bad. And, you know, movies have bad CGI. That's fine. We're not at The Lion King yet. But, like, again, it doesn't go anywhere. There's no point for all the deer attacking the car. There's no point for all the deer standing around the car. That doesn't go anywhere. That plot point doesn't go anywhere. The only way that affects the plot at all moving forward is that she stops driving her car after that. It's not undrivable because she drives it to the newspaper. But then from that point on, she either rides with or drives Max's truck. But that's not relevant. There's no point where the truck is relevant to the plot. There's no point where she has to be in the truck for something to work out. It goes nowhere. There's no reason for it to be in there. And it looks really, really bad. That's the one thing that jogged my memory, was how bad the deer looked. So then we get this whole thing of Rachel seeing Samara. Is it Samara or Samara? I'm probably going to go back and forth. She sees Samara, but it's actually Aiden. And it happens once in his bedroom where Samara's scratching the wall, and then it turns out it's Aiden. And she doesn't follow up with it, which is weird, because even if you're like, okay, I must have just thought it was her, but it's clearly him, the scratch marks are still there. So, like, follow up with that. But then it happens again in the bathtub when she's at Max's house, and she pulls up and sees Samara. And I understand, right, in the moment, I don't know what I would do, right? That's a weird situation. But with Max there, she's holding on to this body that she initially thought was her son, because she knows her son is in the bathtub. She pulls him up. She sees Samara, who at this point, she has already seen Samara where it turned out to be Aiden before. And her first reaction is to shove her back underwater. Which then drives the next big chunk of this movie, which is people thinking that she's abusing her son. Which also goes nowhere. But, like, you've already had that happen once. Again, I realize it's in the moment, but you would think that before shoving this ghost back underwater, because at that point, I don't think she understands that, like, water's a weakness, so it's not like she would have any reason to think that she could drown a ghost. But even if you do think that, like, take a second. Check with Max to make sure that this is not your son. And again, if that went somewhere, fine. But this whole subplot about, oh, she had postpartum depression, and this boy has bruises all over him, and oh my goodness, you know, is she an unfit parent, blah, blah, blah. It goes nowhere. So little of what's in this movie actually goes anywhere. The stuff with the kids at the beginning of the movie goes nowhere. The stuff with the deer goes nowhere. The concept of the VHS tape being outdated and this curse needing to evolve goes nowhere. And the whole idea of her possibly being an abusive mother goes nowhere. Are all of those things a result of studio interference? Maybe, but I don't know. That would have been a really interesting plot development, especially with what happens towards the end when she's told by Carrie, when she's told by Samara's birth mother that she has to kill her child, right? And that could have been played up a lot more, especially if Max hadn't died yet. But even if he had died, which again, his death is pointless, it's just there for the shock scare. Even if he was still dead, like, there could have been a doctor that was investigating, the police could have been involved, someone else could have been there, and see her trying to do this and try to stop her, like Samara's birth mother was stopped at the orphanage, and that could play into the suspense, and she could fight them off and try to continue going, and right? That could have been a bigger moment. But it's not. She just does it alone in their house, and it works perfectly. So this is the point of the movie where I literally wrote down. First one was a supernatural story about a tape and the ghost and the curse behind it. This is just a ghost story. And then I wrote it's forgettable, all right? And this is why I didn't remember anything about it, because it's not memorable like the first one is. It's just another ghost story. Then I wrote Lumbergh, because I can't remember the actor's name, but the guy that plays Lumbergh from Office Space, and other roles from other things. He's in this briefly as a realtor. And then we have a lot of the importance of the acting falling on the kid actor, because he has to play both the actual son and Samara possessing the son. And we get this whole thing between, you know, when he calls her mom or mommy versus when he calls her Rachel. And I think the kid actor does a pretty good job. There's a lot about this movie that I don't really care for. I think he did a pretty decent job of keeping those separate. And they're not wildly different, but it's because Samara is trying to pretend to be him. But, like, you can clearly see two different personalities there. And so just, you know, props to that kid. He's not an actor anymore. He's a lawyer or something now. For like, the Senate? I looked him up. It's kind of weird. But props to that kid. I thought a lot was put on him, and a lot of movies would have fallen even further by putting too much on a kid actor, but I thought he did a good job, in my opinion. So then we get towards the end, and she does go to kill Aiden, but of course she doesn't kill Aiden. Samara escapes or whatever, and then she deals with it another way. And I wrote down, because again, I read that the studio stepped in and made a lot of changes. I wonder if she actually killed him in the original script, if he actually died. Because that would be something that would be different and unique and memorable. That seems like if you want to continue that thread through the movie, that's the logical ending, right? It's not a cop-out ending like what we got. I wonder if that was originally the case, and I wonder how different I would feel about this movie if that's how it ended, but it ends with just, oh no, he's fine, and then she goes in to sacrifice herself, and then she's fine, and everybody's fine, and big happy ending. While Rachel is inside TV land, she falls down the well, or gets pushed down the well, or somehow ends up down the well. And she looks up, and the rock that serves as the lid, for lack of a better word, I don't know what you'd call that part of a well, that the rock that covers the well is partially open. And she says a lot of lines out loud to herself for the sake of the audience, and a lot of them don't make sense. And she says the line, "It's always open. Her way out is always open." And I'm like, is it? Because the whole concept of the ring, before you die, you see the ring that starts and ends the video, the ring that serves as the main iconic motif of the film, is the light going around the lid, which is fully covering the well. So to say it's always open, I'm like, have you not seen any of that? And then, even if you ignore all of that, the fact that she's there and she sees that it's open, and then she immediately says, it's always open. I'm like, well, how? Again, ignoring all that, how would you know that it's always open and not just open right now? And the closest that I can think of is that every time Samara comes to kill someone by coming through the TV, she climbs up this well and across the grass and out the TV. So I'm like, maybe that's what she's talking about. Every time she kills someone, it's always open. But I'm like, how many times has she seen that? Because it happened to, I can't even remember her baby's daddy's name from the first movie, Noah. It happened to him, but she wasn't there. Samara didn't come out of the TV at her in the first movie. She only did here in the second movie. Right before she says it's always open. So, like, we, the audience, have seen that happen multiple times by this point, but she hasn't. So this line, again, makes absolutely no sense. It does, I guess, technically go somewhere, though, because she climbs up and shuts it, and that seems to be the end. Obviously not, because there's another movie in the franchise, but at least that goes somewhere. The place that it goes to is, like, 2 minutes from now, so it's not like a big movie-long thread that they're following. But hey, half a point. And then my last note was that in the first movie, the kid calls her Rachel, and it's never acknowledged, right? He doesn't say anything about it. She doesn't say anything about it. The teacher doesn't say anything about it. Nobody they meet says anything about it. It's just accepted that he calls her Rachel, and we, the audience, were like, okay, that's kind of weird, but whatever. They seem like they're fine with it. Not acknowledged at all. And then in this movie, that becomes a huge part of the third act, when Samara is possessing him, and she can tell that it's not her kid because Samara keeps calling her mommy, right? And then she knows that it's Aiden when he calls her Rachel. And there's a little weird part when she's trying to kill him where Samara does say Rachel, and I'm like, so what if Samara knows that, why does she keep calling her mommy? If she knows that she's supposed to call her Rachel. And if she doesn't know that, then why did she say it? And literally, later on, if not in the same sentence, then literally within 10 seconds, but I believe it's in the same sentence, she calls her mom again. Or is it not the same sentence, it's the next sentence. Samara goes from calling her Rachel to mom, which is how she knows that it's not really Aiden. So this is a big part of the third act, which doesn't fully make sense, but in order to make that more obvious for the audience, in the first act, it's set up that she says, you know, it wouldn't kill you to call me mom once in a while. And he's like, no, I like Rachel. You know, Rachel's fine. And then she's like, fine, whatever. And then at the end of the movie, she's like, just call me Rachel, it's fine, right? Because she's creeped out by being called mom. But why did she bring that up? Because it's not a problem that she has in the first movie. Nobody brings it up as a problem. It's not even addressed. So hopefully you see what I mean when I say that this movie, technically it continues the story, but it's not a logical follow-up to The Ring. It's not about the same stuff. The things that the characters say and do don't make sense, and plot points that are introduced go nowhere. Maybe that's all on the studio. Maybe all of that is the cause of studio interference. I don't know. I don't think this movie was atrocious or very, very bad, except for that scene with all the deer. But it is nowhere near the experience what the first Ring was. So I'm going to move on and watch the feature-length film called Rings. Again, this is like Halloween did it, Fast and Furious did it, and this has done it, where we had a short film called Rings between the first and second movie. What do we call the third movie? Rings. Why, movie companies? Why do you do this? Why do you make it so confusing? I don't think I've ever watched this, Rings. And I think when I bought it, I bought it at like a used bookstore a lot of these movies that I've bought, this bookstore that I used to go to, had this once in a while deal where you would get a tote bag, and anything you could fit in the tote bag was $30 total. And I got a teacher discount on top of that. So anything I saw that looked remotely interesting, I would throw in there. And I'm pretty sure when I bought this, I thought it was a standalone DVD of the short film. Because I knew about the short film at that time, and I knew that I had it, but I was like, oh, it'd be cool to have it on its, as its own thing. And then I think I later realized that it's a separate movie, but I cannot remember if I've ever watched it or not. So I'll find out, hopefully, unless it's as unmemorable as the second one. But I'm getting ahead of myself, so let's pause. We'll talk about Rings in its own video. That's all that I've got for The Ring 2. Those are my thoughts. You can let me know any thoughts that you have, but that's all that I have to say. Thank you very much for watching, and have a good day. Hey everybody, Sam Tom here. Just wanted to let you know that I have 2 channels. If you're watching my music content, I also have a movie channel where I talk about movies and TV shows. If you're watching my movie content, I have a music channel where I do song covers, instrument demos, things like that. So feel free to check that out. Obviously, like, share, subscribe, comment, all that YouTube stuff. Thank you very much for watching, and have a good day.